Back now to the situation in Syria, and the UN Arab League's envoy has called on all countries to come up with a plan to end the crisis. That call included Iran, where Lakhdar Brahimi has been visiting. Reza Marashi is a director at the Iranian-American Research Council, and he joins us now from Washington. Reza, thanks for being with us. One of the big problems that we've had in this entire conflict, one that Lakhdar Brahimi's predecessor also ran into, was the fact that Iran is persona non grata in these talks, according to the United States.
That's right. Not just according to the United States, also according to America's allies, such as Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and others. I think all sides are doubling down on extremist positions at the moment in an effort to create leverage vis-a-vis one another. But we've reached a point now where the new envoy is saying the same thing as the previous envoy, which is all sides need to invest in a political solution because there is no military solution to this conflict. There are military options, but those military options at the end of the day only create leverage to help all the sides potentially create a more favorable political solution, more favorable outcome to their needs and preferences. So Mr. Brahimi's remarks are important, and it should be taken very seriously in all capitals.
But is there any suggestion or any possibility that he might succeed in pushing the same line that failed Kofi Annan?
Certainly not before America's elections on November 6th. I think after the elections is when you'll start to see the real magic start to happen. That's when, irrespective of who the president is, they'll have more political space to make a decision on whether or not they want to invest in a political solution that will have Iran at the table, whether that's direct negotiations involving Iran or something more discreet away from the media and the limelight. Now, the range of options that are available to an American president don't change, irrespective of whether or not you have a Democrat or a Republican in the White House. But I think we've seen what Republican foreign policy looks like under the George W. Bush administration. Mitt Romney has the same advisors should he win. So if Barack Obama wins, I think there is a real chance that you'll see something go on behind the scenes to try and find a political solution to stop the violence.
At a broad level, on a superficial level, it would appear that involving Iran in the conversation only makes sense. I mean, they're part of the problem and presumably part of the solution. But then you've got a lot of people who say that Iran's position is a destructive one and will only serve to create more problems. Which is the correct option? I guess we should start that question by saying, what exactly is Iran's position on this?
I think that's a great question and a very important one. You know, Iran is playing an unconstructive role, but that's one of the ways that it creates leverage vis-a-vis the international community. It's not a problem solver, but it inserts itself into situations in such a way that problems can't be solved oftentimes unless there's Iranian buy-in. You're talking about issues ranging from Syria to Afghanistan to Iraq to nuclear security, energy security. All of these issues are related to Iran. Even to a certain extent, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Iran can play a spoiler role. So mitigating negative Iranian influence usually requires, and most people think often requires, creating some level of buy-in. Now, what would the Iranian government want to see in Syria? I think there are different factions that have different opinions and different preferences. But nobody in Iran right now is happy with the way that things are going in Syria, because Iran used to use its position in the Middle East vis-a-vis the Arab street to champion the cause of the street versus the oppressor. But now it's on the side of the oppressor who's oppressing the Syrian street, and it's losing a lot of political capital in that sense. So I think Iran would be interested in finding some kind of solution to this crisis sooner rather than later.
Just to clarify that point, I mean, obviously, as you say, there are much broader strategic imperatives at play here on both sides of this equation. But the suggestion that Iran is backing Assad personally for reasons that generally tend to be painted as nefarious and unpleasant, is that actually the case? I mean, does Iran have any particular allegiance to Assad on an individual basis?
I think the allegiance that Iran has is more to the regime that's currently running Syria as opposed to Assad as an individual. And there are signs that the Iranian government would be willing to invest in a situation where you cut off the proverbial head of the snake so Assad were to go, but elements of the regime would be part of a new power-sharing structure that would run the country. I think that's something that Iran would seriously consider. There's no guarantee as to whether or not that will be the final outcome, because nobody knows whether or not that's something that can be negotiated until the parties sit down at the table and actually talk to one another.
All right, there we will leave it. Thanks very much indeed for talking to us. That's Reza Marashi live from Washington, D.C.